March and April. And this actually led to an increased economic activity, especially as the quarter has progressed. The various measures taken by the government and the Reserve Bank of India augur well both from an incomes point of view, for example, step up to the Manrega spends, and to the overall market liquidity. Our disruptions to the business and to the economic uncertainty has resulted in lowering of consumer confidence, and consumers are being a little circumspect with respect to their spends. There are various reports which now signal that the GDP could be in the negative territory. In the market, in the quarter, we have also seen inflationary pressures build up, especially in veg oils and tea, namely two commodities, and crude and currency continue to be volatile. Rural markets have been more resilient in comparison to urban. A little bit about our strategy and I think which has really enabled a turnaround in the performance. I think our focus on growth fundamentals, namely penetration, purposeful brands, impactful innovations, design for channel, and fuel for growth, combined with agility and responsiveness, have positioned us well and enabled a fast turnaround in the business. You will appreciate at the end of April, we were only at about 75% of normative levels. And from there on today, we are almost near normal. We have significantly reduced complexity in the business to optimize output and created capacities in many categories such as hand wash and hand sanitizers. Our digital capabilities across the business are serving us well. We've also made good progress on the 5 priority areas which we had called out, namely people, supply, demand, community, cash, and cost. Despite the lockdown, we were able to successfully integrate the GSK consumer business effective 1st of April. We are indeed privileged to be addressing the nutrition and the immunity needs of our consumers. We're also happy to note that we made a very good beginning to the business, both in terms of growth as well as margins. Now, let me talk to you a bit about the performance summary for the quarter. We have delivered a resilient and a competitive performance in the quarter. Our reported turnover growth is at positive 4%, and this includes the impact of the merger of GSK Consumer. On a like-for-like basis, if I exclude the GSK merger, our business actually declined by about 7%. There are some nuances to this, and I will call them out in due course. But before I do that, it's important to highlight that our performance has been very, very competitive. More than 86% of our business is actually gaining volume shares as we use the Kanta World Panel data, and about 80% on a value basis. At 25%, our absolute EBITDA margins remain healthy. And while the margins will lower by about 110 basis points, but the overall margins continue to be extremely healthy. And our profit, PAT BEI, as well as our net profit actually grew by about 7%. Before I go into the divisional performance, I think it's important to highlight the different nature of the business given what's happening with COVID. And I think it's important to call out here that about 80% of our business actually addresses the health, hygiene, and nutrition needs of the consumers. And this part of the business has actually delivered a 6% growth. So while the overall comparable business was -7, it's important to call out that at least 80% of the business actually delivered a 6% growth, which basically means that due to supply chain lockdowns and supply constraints, and some of our out-of-home categories such as ice creams, food solutions, they were all impacted because of the economic environment and had a deep negative, which resulted in the overall headline numbers being -7. I think it's important to understand that because 80% of the business is well positioned and actually in good space. Now, let me give you a little bit of a flavor in the divisional context. In our home care business, our growth was competitive with both fabric wash and household care doing very well, while addressing the clean living needs of our consumers. Our household care business grew strongly on back of penetration gains. And in fabric wash, our diversified portfolio straddling the pyramid yielded stable performance. Basically from purifiers, which was more consumer durable in nature and got impacted with many of the stores not really being open. In beauty and personal care, in skin cleansing, we had a stellar performance with strong double-digit growth. And Lifebuoy is a clear call-out. It grew in double digits across all formats and did exceedingly well. Lifebuoy is also making good progress with the habit of hand washing campaigns going viral across all platforms. Oral care delivered good performance with accelerated momentum in close-up. In hair care, we saw pickup in consumer demand in the latter part of the quarter. Yeah, in initial parts, we had some restrictions in terms of manufacture, and it came through quite well. Performance of skin, color cosmetics, and deodorants. These are relatively discretionary in nature, and they also got impacted because we couldn't really commence manufacturing in the first part of the quarter. Actually had negative growths, which pulled down the overall BPC growths. When I look at foods and refreshments, riding on the trends of in-home wellness and immunity, our foods business, our tea business, and our coffee business delivered strong double-digit growths. Here again, it's really our ice creams, food solutions, and our vending business, which are driven primarily by out-of-home consumption, got impacted and therefore pulled down the overall segment growth. Our nutrition business performed well, while there is no base comparator because it comes in completely afresh. We compared it with what GSK had reported in last year in the base quarter. And using that lens, our nutrition business has actually delivered a 5%. That's just ability in terms of how that has performed. With reference to cost and margin management, I think we had lots of adverse headwinds. We had negative mix, we had COVID on costs, and all of these were managed well, managed deftly by dialing up our savings and unlocking synergies from our GSK-CH merger. We continue to invest behind our brands, and our spends were actually quite competitive in the quarter, while they may be lower in absolute terms, but our share of voice was actually higher than where we were a year ago. Taking into account all of this, we're also pleased to update you that the board of directors of the company have approved a dividend payment of 9.5 rupees per share, which amounts to 2,232 crores. And this is in accordance with a scheme which was approved earlier. Our balance sheet and liquidity position continues to be strong, supporting our business model. Now, if I really summarize looking ahead, I think the outbreak of COVID-19 has disrupted the business massively in the short term, and the road to new normal is a bit uncertain. In this unprecedented times, it's a bit difficult to have a good sense of the demand or the market growth prognosis, and we'll have to wait for a little bit of time to really get a sense there. Liquidity pressures continue to remain elevated, and many of you will appreciate that in the month of July, we have now started to see a lot more localized lockdowns in many parts of the country. Having said all of this, I think we continue to manage our business with speed and agility. Our multi-stakeholder model, our portfolio of brands, our organizational agility and quality of leadership enables us to focus and deliver a competitive volume-led growth. I think we're very confident in terms of our ability to deliver market-beating growth, notwithstanding the current environment. And we remain confident about the medium to the long-term prospects of the FMCG sector. Yeah, I'll pause here, and we're very happy to take questions in the sequence which Prasad would really indicate us to.
Thank you, Srini. Priya, can you go first?
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I wanted to begin with asking you on your volume growth. Break the volume growth for us. I understand it's negative 8%. So where have we lost out in terms of volumes? The other thing is the impact of intermittent lockdowns. We've been seeing localized lockdowns taking place. So what has been the impact on your supply chain? Is it tougher to get supply chain in rural areas back on track? And I also wanted to understand on the rural-urban mix. Rural has historically been growing twice the rate at which urban grows. So what is the rate at which rural is growing at present?
So Sanjiv, I will answer the first part of the question, and then you could pick up the next two. So I think it's important to say that when we call out UVG, it's underlying volume growth. It's a combination of volumes and mix. It's just not absolute volumes, because if you see from an absolute volume sense, we are actually flat to positive, which is quite healthy. But because it's an underlying volume growth, a negative mix impacts us. So when BPC does a little worse in comparison to the other two categories, we see that negative mix coming in. Some of the places which I spoke to you about where the volumes get impacted, but clearly in terms of skincare, because of our food solutions and our vending businesses, consumption locations that also got impacted significantly. So these are the spaces where, let's say, our UVG came down. But if you really see in the overall place, I think at a USG of -7, but important to understand about 80% of the business is actually growing 6%. It's the 20% which has actually had deep negatives, which resulted in these numbers. Yeah. So Sanjiv, your comments on the localized lockdowns and the urban rural.
All right. Thank you, Priya, for that question. So there were two questions. Let me start first with the rural. At this stage, we have not had access to Nielsen reports. So we do not have precise numbers. So what we have been relying on our own internal data and the consumer panel data for looking at a competitiveness. The good bit has been that with all the steps that the government took in recent times, increasing the outlay on Manrega, direct transfer of money, and also a good harvest, we clearly saw that the rural growth has been a bit higher than urban, but very difficult to pinpoint precise numbers. I think we'll have to wait for another quarter to see how the trend is shaping up. And hopefully by then, even the Nielsen numbers will be out. Your second question is about the vertical lockdowns. Yeah, if I paint the picture, then in the second half of June and the earlier part of July, the logistics in the country had significantly improved, and we were seeing a certain rhythm coming in. But as the number of infections have gone up, I think the local administrations, in the interest of the health and safety of the people, have been doing vertical lockdowns. So we have seen disruptions happening in the last 10 days, but there is still a large part of the quarter still to go. And I do hope that by then things would improve and we should be able to cover up for some of the hiccups that we have seen in the last 10 days.
Thank you. Neha, can you ask your question?
A very good evening, gentlemen. The first question is with regards to discretionary categories. I know you said that you are seeing some kind of, there has been pressures on out-of-home consumption as well. But Mr. Mehta, during your AGM, you said that you have started seeing pickup as far as your discretionary categories go as well, which includes your skincare and hair care. So if you could throw a little bit more light on what exactly is happening and by when can we see some kind of meaningful revival happening. And the second question is with regards to inflation. You said that you've seen inflationary pressures in a couple of categories, namely tea. You're also seeing uncertainty as far as crude oil is concerned. So are we going to see some kind of pricing action coming in from HUL?
Okay, let me first start by the discretionary categories. Hair is more towards the cleaning part. And in the initial period, hair was impacted a bit by supply-led issues. But then in the latter half of the previous quarter, that is the June quarter, we have seen the demand for hair pick up. Now it comes to what we call as the categories which have been impacted by supply-led issues because they were not termed essential, as well as by relatively more discretionary. And in these categories, we will keep in, say, like skincare, then it would be our color cosmetic business, and then it would be our deos business. Yeah. Now, clearly, we have seen that as the supply issues have improved, the demand also correspondingly went up for categories like skincare. As far as color cosmetics is concerned, many of the stores which are very relevant for this categories, like they are in the malls and all, or they are in upper end modern trade stores. And those stores have remained closed, so the demand has been impacted. But you're absolutely right, Neha, that I believe that the lipstick effect will sooner rather than later come into play. And people would want to look good and feel good. Yeah, but it's still early days, but we are optimistic that the demand for this product should also pick up because they are affordable products. And who in the world doesn't want to feel good and look good? Yeah.
Sir, the second question was related
Neha,
With reference to your second question, you're right that there's definitely inflationary pressures coming through in some categories, namely tea. And I think you've known our principles. We've been actually judicious in terms of how we want to look at the portfolio. Whereas if you see the inflation has been significantly high, and especially in the premium end. Having said that, I think it's also important to highlight while crude continues to be at volatile. If I compare on a year-on-year basis, crude is definitely much lower than where it was. And to that extent, we are actually taking down prices in some of our home care categories and actually passing on the benefit to the consumers. So that's how the portfolio works. While in some parts we are, pricing to the inflation, in other cases we are actually passing on the benefits. But an aggregate level, I don't think pricing or pricing actions are going to be material when we add up all of them together.
So if you could just help me understand which categories you've taken price hikes. I understand home care is where you've taken price cuts.
So in home care, we have taken some price down. We have taken a little bit of price increases in tea. And if you actually look at nutrition, we actually introduced poly packs, which is an affordable pack for our consumers. It's not a pricing action, but a market development action. But it almost brings down the price of Horlicks in some of these packs by about 20%, 15 to 20%, which also is helpful to consumers. So it's a different action across different parts of the world.
Okay, thank you so much.
Charlene, can you go next, please?
Yes. Thank you for addressing my questions. The first thing, I would want some clarity on your volume numbers, inclusive of the acquisition, the GSK acquisition, and excluding the acquisition. Where do your volume numbers stand at? And secondly, have you taken price cuts in the detergent category to the extent of which in the range of 5 to 12%?
So let me try and address that. Yeah. So it's in the first phase, I think it's important to understand the headline numbers, and we'll come to volumes in UVG. Yeah. We've always talked to you about UVG because it's very easy to talk to you about volumes, but I will address both of them. First phase we said is that all put together, we have seen a growth of 4%. I think that's important to understand because it's got nutrition included. I can get that number clear. If I exclude Horlicks, or the GSK or nutrition business, our numbers are -7. Because the whole nutrition business has no comparator, there's 11% incremental which comes in, which goes therefore from -7 to 4. Now, if you really look at from a UVG point of view, and I think let's talk because look, on the GSK side, it's been positive, both from a growth point of view as well as a volumes perspective. When I look at our base business, we said our USG is -7 and our UVG is -8. So very similar in terms of that. But the important aspect to call here is our UVG is a combination of volumes and mix. And because, let's say, parts of our beauty and personal care have not done relatively as well as the others, we have a big negative mix impact. Because if you simply talk in terms of volumes, we will be flat to positive. But I think the right indicator for our business has always been talking about price growth and a UVG being a combination of volume and mix.
Thank you, Srini. Devanshi, do you want to ask the next question?
Yeah, sure. Hello, sir. This is Devanshi from Z Business. Many congratulations on the numbers, sir. So this time also we saw that the numbers are a little surprising, like positively. So that's good. So my first question is, what kind of challenges are you still facing in terms of receivables from small the shopkeepers and the vendors? Also, have you increased your e-commerce sales? Do you have a different strategy now because you're not facing much of challenges in terms of payment from the e-commerce people? Also, how much have you increased your advertisement cost? And lastly, I would want to know if you can throw some light on, is there any different strategy for your GSK? What kind of synergy benefits now are you looking at post-COVID for your GSK portfolio?
So Sanjiv, would you want to address the e-commerce and some thoughts on nutrition?
Sure.
And talk through about the liquidity and
e-commerce has, not surprisingly, has grown at a very fast pace during this period, but it is still a relatively small part of our business. It is not that e-commerce is dwarfing the other leg of the business. Yeah, so that's something which we have to understand. But within e-commerce, if I look at the technology play, I think what has come in very handy for us are all the initiatives that we have taken under the Reimagine HUL agenda. If you recall, we have a Shikhar app with the traders, and they can place the order whenever they feel like, even when the salesman doesn't visit them. The adoption of Shikhar app has gone up significantly. Retailers to access our products even when there are constraints of physical people going to their store. So if you look at it from this perspective, it is very clear that e-commerce in its pristine sense is growing at a very rapid rate, but albeit still very small. And technology is playing a much bigger part in our distribution. As far as Horlicks is concerned, it's been absolutely, like I say, a marriage made in heaven. And the acquisition couldn't have come at a better time when people are clamoring for better nutrition. What better way to get nutrition than by consuming Horlicks and Boost? And our scientists, they were absolutely quick in rolling out the variant with added zinc, which boosts immunity. And that again augurs so well for the consumers during this testing times. As far as a synergy is concerned, again, we are very happy to state that what we had planned for, the synergy comes from two big areas. One is the growth. And the growth comes from our distribution, which is much wider. And the second is our competency in growing the market. What Srini alluded to a while back, that we have gone in with more accessible packs, is to grow the market, develop the market. The second is our distribution. So now the distribution is being integrated, and we will in the days to come see more footprints of Horlicks in the market. As far as the costs are concerned, again, very pleased. Our teams moved in seamlessly, and from the very first month, there are areas where we have started to harness the benefit of the Horlicks and Boost business, or the nutrition business, as we call it, coming into our field.
All right.
So very quickly,
I'm
liquidity.
so sorry to hello. So sorry to interrupt you, sir. Would you have this answer in Hindi? Only if you're comfortable.
हाँ जी, मैं बता सकता हूँ हिंदी में, कोशिश करता हूँ.
बिल्कुल सर.
So I would certainly, मैं कोशिश करता हूँ. देखिए, during these days, आजकल के दिनों में e-commerce का business तो काफी तरक्की में कर रहा है, क्योंकि सब लोग आजकल they are on internet, smartphone use कर रहे हैं, और आपको घर में delivery हो जाती है. So it is very obvious कि e-commerce तो तरक्की करेगा ही, लेकिन e-commerce अभी भी FMCG में काफी small है. Though it is growing at a faster, काफी grow कर रहा है, लेकिन अभी भी उसकी जो पूरी है, I would say the share जो है अभी भी काफी छोटा है. जो दूसरे end में is adoption of technology. जो हमारे ग्रोसरी वाले स्टोर हैं, किराना स्टोर हैं, ये लोग भी more and more ज्यादा टेक्नोलॉजी अडॉप्ट करने लगे. जैसे हिंदुस्तान यूनिलीवर का एक शिखर ऐप है, जिससे रिटेलर जो है वो ऑर्डर प्लेस कर सकता है कंपनी के डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर पर, जब डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर का सेल्समैन नहीं जाए उनकी दुकान में तब भी कर सकता है. तो इसकी जो अडॉप्शन हुई है शिखर की, दैट हैज गॉन अप, वो काफी ज्यादा हुई. एंड आई थिंक दैट अगेन पोजेस वेरी वेल. इससे काफी फायदा रहेगा हमारे जो रिटेलर्स को, कि वो लोग मोर ज्यादा अडॉप्शन करें टेक्नोलॉजी की, और इससे दे विल बी एबल टू थ्राइव एंड सक्सीड इवन इन अ वर्ल्ड जहाँ पे ई-कॉमर्स है.
बिल्कुल. और सर, जो विज्ञापन खर्च है वो कितना बड़ा है आपका इस सिचुएशन में?
देखिए, विज्ञापन खर्च में ना हम हमेशा ये देखते हैं कि हमें कंपेटिटिव होना चाहिए, और अगर आप देखें हमारा जो शेयर ऑफ वॉइस है वो हमेशा शेयर ऑफ मार्केट से ज्यादा होता है, और ये हम हमेशा रखेंगे, क्योंकि हमें अपनी मैसेज हमारे कंज्यूमर्स तक ले जानी पड़ती है. एंड हम हमेशा देखते हैं कि कैसे हो सकता है जिससे ज्यादा से ज्यादा कंज्यूमर हमारे एडवर्टाइजिंग देखें और हमारी जो ब्रांड सेलियंसी है वो बिल्ड होती है.
बिल्कुल. सर, लास्टली बस ये पूछना था कि अभी भी क्या वैसे चैलेंजेस हैं आपको, जो शॉपकीपर्स हैं वहां से थोड़े से पेबल्स रिसीवेबल्स आने में अभी भी दिक्कतें हो रही हैं?
श्रीनी, would you want to bat on this?
नहीं, देखिए, ज्यादा लिक्विडिटी का तो प्रेशर है सिस्टम में, चाहे हमारे डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स हों या छोटे मोटे दुकानदार हों. बट यहाँ पर यही है कि अगर आप बिजनेस इस तरह से हम लोग चलाते हैं, हम भी सपोर्ट आवर डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स और हमारे डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स ऑल्सो सपोर्ट हमारे रिटेल दुकान। उनके साथ हमने काम किया, हमने एक्चुअली हाथ बढ़ाया। अगर हम पूरे एग्रीगेट तरीके से देखें, हमारा बिजनेस अच्छा चल रहा है, हमारे डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स अच्छा चला रहे हैं। इवन एट अ रिटेलर एंड हम लोगों को इतनी दुविधा नहीं हुई है। एंड आई थिंक यहीं पर आता है हिंदुस्तान लीवर का विन विन और पार्टनरशिप अप्रोच। अगर आप सब लोगों को साथ लेके चलेंगे तो उनका भी फायदा होगा और उनका अगर फायदा होगा तो हमारा भी फायदा होगा। तो हाँ, प्रेशर है, लेकिन आई थिंक एज हिंदुस्तान लीवर, यूनिलीवर, हमने इसको अच्छी तरह से संभाला।
Thank you so much, sir. That's all from my side.
Thank you.
And
We have
beautiful
time.
Hindi. So sweet, sir.
We have time for one final question. Priya, you want to ask?
Yes. I wanted to ask you a question quickly on the volume growth. You said -8%. Of course, last quarter you all had reported a -7% kind of volume growth. So is this the worst? You think the worst is over in terms of negative volume growth? And also on the GSK integration, I wanted to ask. You said that you're looking at integrating the whole distribution channel and reducing the kind of complexity. So does this mean that there is some rationalization as far as distributors has happened, and what are the new kind of SKUs that you're planning to launch for GSK?
Okay, let me first take the question on GSK. We just spoke about that we have already launched a couple of packs which makes our products much more accessible to the consumers. And this is going to be a continuous process, Priya, because we want to grow the market. We have leading market shares, and our joy will come out when more consumers use our products. So that's what we call as market development. Second is distribution also. We are doing it in a very planned manner because there are two types of distribution that has happened. One is the distribution of Horlicks and Boost. The other is we have also taken over the distribution of OTC products of erstwhile GSK Consumer Health. Yeah. And we have teams which have been working on it for a long period of time on how do we do it in a manner that we can retain the best distributors from both sides and in the process increase the footprints of our distribution of Horlicks and Boost. So that's a process which has commenced and it will run through the course with a clear objective that we want to have our products available in more stores.
Thank you.
So
thank
I
you,
just
Sanjiv.
had one follow-up question. So please, just one.
I had the
follow-up
volume question which was not answered.
No,
I'm sorry.
So just one
Volume,
follow-up
you
question.
were talking about is the worst over, right, Priya? Now, very difficult to gauge. The reason why first is we never give guidance, but prediction. Why it is difficult? Because it depends on many variables. It depends on how the infection curve will happen. It will also depend on to what extent there will be vertical lockdowns and for how long. And then it will also depend on how the economy kickstarts and how people feel more confident to spend the money. So there are various variables at play. I think from our perspective, we focus on 5 critical areas. One very clearly is to ensuring that our people remain safe and we take all possible measures. Yeah. And in case they do get infected, then how do we provide them the best possible care? The second is, despite all the challenges, how do we keep the supply lines running and make our products available as close to the consumer as possible? The third is, we keep our fingers on the pulse of the consumer to understand what their needs are, their unmet needs are, what their apprehensions are, what their perceptions are. The fourth is, while we are a cash-rich company and we are pretty liquid from a perspective, but we still want to ensure that our business model remains strong and the entire ecosystem in which we operate remains strong. And fifth, but very importantly, how can we as a company contribute to the community development or help the community in times of need? So those are the 5 priority areas. And then when you look at it, is the strength of our brands, the portfolio that we have where we straddle the price benefit pyramid. Yeah, the agility that you have seen HUL display at various times. Yeah. Say very clearly the people we have, the purpose-driven people we have, and the strength of our balance sheet. That's what augurs well for us. And we remain confident that we will be able to navigate any turbulence that would come in our way. Right?
Sir,
Neha, we can take your
Yes.
we can take your questions later now because we are
So just one
overshot
question.
our time.
So just one question. Just one question. So I know that you've seen quite a stellar growth when it comes to your health and hygiene portfolio. About 80% of your portfolio, like you said, is that, and you've launched a few products. So, but I want to understand how sustainable is that growth, because a lot of demand that has been created is also need-based, both in rural and urban. So I want to understand how sustainable is this growth.
Okay, Neha, let me give you an example. We spend a lot of money in educating the people to wash their hands with soap at the right time during the day. Yeah. So we call this as market development, and we have reached about 70 million people in the last few years educating. I think at this time, we don't need to educate people that you need to wash your hands with soap, because there is very clearly a very heightened need and awareness. I believe that one of the things that will happen, even after the vaccine has developed, that as a country, our consciousness on hygiene and personal safety will go up significantly. Of course, I don't believe that the demand for sanitizers will remain at this level, but the behavior change that we are seeking in consumers, which in turn will help them lead a better life, will certainly get established. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir.
Welcome.
So thank you very much for joining
Keep safe,
us.
all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.